All right. Welcome to everyone to a new episode of the IBNS educational program. And I immediately gave the space to Cedrian, which will introduce us about new Banknotes family in Mexico. Cedrian, all yours.
Thank you very much, Fabricio. If you can confirm that you're seeing the full screen. Can you?
No. Yes, Cedrian, apparently there's some issue with the communication with Cedrian. Hold on, guys. I'm trying to contact Cedrian on WhatsApp. Cedrian,
sorry, guys,
there?
can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. And
but there's no screen.
Can you see the screen now?
Now we can see the screen. The screen has started now.
Okay, so let me then try to present and you tell me whether you can see the full screen.
All right, full screen is here.
Perfect. So sorry about that. Technical issues always happen. So thank you, Fabricio, very much for putting these talks together. I prepared this presentation a few months ago. Actually, it was made for a congress here in Mexico that was Mexico's Numismatic Association. And this presentation was made before the two last denominations were released. I'll talk a little bit later about that, but a couple of weeks ago, we had two new denominations of the new family being released. And the idea was to showcase what is the work behind producing a banknote family, in particular after some critics started in social media criticizing the work of the bank because of an infographic that was presented. Actually, it was this infographic. This person is saying not even the worst of the interns can make such a bad work. And they didn't actually pay attention to anything. They didn't understand, or they didn't want to understand, that this was just an infographic that tried to explain very easily what were the topics of the banknotes. And actually, this was not the first denomination. This was supposed to be the third denomination to be issued. So I said, okay, well, let's try to explain what's behind. And also I did that because the Bank of Mexico actually publicized a lot of information about the banknote production process. You know that normally central banks do not disclose all the process that is behind, all the creation process. And they, when they released the first denomination, actually the images of this denomination, the 500 pesos, was leaked to social media. And then the bank, when they formally released that denomination, they put a lot of information on the website, trying to make everything transparent. So I said, well, this is very interesting. No one will read more than 1,000 pages of information related to banknotes. I did, obviously, and the idea was precisely try to simplify everything for a general public. Obviously, this crowd, the IBNS, is a much more specialized audience. And on the previous talks that we had on this series, some of you actually presented some information that is related to this. Now, for example, Jonathan and Rukmini explained that countries use banknotes to position some messages, and that they are also used to create identity. Even though, as Rukmini said on the last conversation, sometimes most people do not realize what is the message behind. Now, beyond the artistic part, there is also a production process. It's an industrial process, and that needs to take several things into account. For example, again, Jonathan said that issuers should select 2 out of 3 elements. You can have it fast, good, or cheap, but you can have it all. And I think that on the conversation that we at the end of the last call, also someone mentioned that when a third party prepares a client brief, this includes the work of historians, academicians. There are some politicians, people that spend time on the places in order to understand better what the issuer wants to showcase and represent it as money. So the idea for today is to explain how this process takes place, how long does it take, who's involved, and what issues are taken into consideration. Here, obviously, is the experience of only one country and only one issuer and only for one family, because I think that every time there are different considerations in place, but I think it was a very interesting transparency exercise that the Banco de Mexico did. And in this regard, this is what I want to present. So first, a couple of basics that I will go very quick because you know this more than what I do. Banknotes are means of payments, and they have a fiduciary value, and they must have at least 3 qualities. They must be easily recognizable, they should build trust, and be widely accepted. So in order for this to be able to happen, the issuers create what they call banknote families. They have some common elements that facilitate the identification, and that also includes some security measures that difficult reproduction and reinforce identity factors. Is not the same. When you have a banknote family, you normally try to have the same aesthetics in order to be able to recognize easily the different denominations and also the security measures. See, if you put 2 different measures on every single denomination, it will be more complicated to identify it, to authenticate the denomination and also the authenticity of the banknotes. So basically, that's why banknote issuers issue these banknote families. Let me see. Okay, cool. So normally, family is changed currently around every 7 to 10 years because of technology because of technology to print. It makes easier to create reproductions very easily. So issuers to prevent counterfeiting and to put on the state of the art in terms of safety, they create a banknote family every 7 to 10 years, or at least they reinforce some security elements. I liked very much this tweet from De La Rue because they also are showing that this is also a time to start a new era. So every time that a banknote, a central bank issues a new banknote, it is a time to start a new era, and this is what banknote families try to do. Since its inception in 1979, since the creation of the banknote family, the banknote factory in Mexico, Banco de Mexico has issued several families of banknotes. I don't necessarily agree with their classifications on the taxonomy that they have to classify the specific families. But because, for example, the family A, which was started to be issued in 1983, is actually a continuation of the family AA. And they also issued some revised versions of families, like in 2008 and one, they improved the security measures for the previous family, and they call it differently. But in any case, as you can see here, there are some elements in common, and sometimes some banknote families reproduce the images of previous families. One thing that is important is that by law in Mexico, every banknote should bear series, serial numbers, date of issuing, the facsimile signatures of the board member and the main cashier, and the title Banco de Mexico, as well as other that the Banco de Mexico decides. The last two banknote families had some things in common. So I think that I like very much this image because it shows some elements that help you to identify what you have to see on the banknotes. So on the previous banknote family, you had only two sizes. The two small denominations had a one size, and then the four largest another. And then for the banknote family that is passing out, we have different sizes for each one of the denominations, and this is in order to help identifications by the visually impaired people. So besides this, I like these two other images that basically, with a very simple sketch, showcase how the banknotes on the left have some similarities because of the design, the position where the main character is presented, some lines that actually showcase that this is part of a single family, and then when I switch to a different one, also they all have some similarities. So that's the idea of creating a banknote family, is a family that shares some features. So when the 500 pesos right on here on the right side was issued, this was the last version of the notes of this family. They started thinking on creating a new family. They issued another one, which is a revised version of the 50 pesos because of a forgery that was discovered. But in spite of that, they started thinking on creating a new banknote family. And in 2013, when the same year that this revised version of the 50 pesos was launched, the board of governors of the Bank of Mexico authorized the bank to start a program to design a new banknote family. And the idea was thinking on replacing the banknote family that was just finished to be put in circulation, and to find other elements in terms of security and durability that could help the bank to ensure that people had banknotes in good shape for the use, that were, as I mentioned before, that were easily recognizable, that were sure, and that people actually felt identified with them. And they said, okay, let's take this opportunity to figure out whether there are some graphic elements that could represent Mexico widely, and that people actually felt identified with that. So that process was supposed to be taken, or is supposed to be taken, into 10 years, a full decade. So how, when even for us that we know a lot more than the general public on what a banknote is and what it displays, and we know that there are done some focus groups, I don't know if we could actually imagine all the work that 10 years, a span of 10 years could imply to produce a banknote family. So what the Banco de Mexico disclosed was a lot of information on the preparatory process. So first of all, they did some research. To create the general idea, select the security features and the design guidelines. I find very interesting this, that the security features were defined by mid 2015, because we are seeing notes that are not yet being put in circulation. So by the time that these denominations are being put in place, actually the security features are a little bit outdated. So after this research, they organized a design workshop with specialists from all over the world. They selected the structure of the notes. Actually, you will figure out that they decided to eliminate one denomination, the 20 pesos notes. And I'll talk a little bit later of that. And in the meantime, they actually started to using some of the stuff that were selected during this process to design and produce one commemorative banknote of 100 pesos. This is interesting because it belongs to the new family. It has some features from the new family. Nevertheless, it was issued within the parameters of the previous family. So I think it's an interesting banknote. So after that, they started designing each one of the denominations, and this is a process where that it implies several things. They already had the team, so they have what they have to do is select the images, get all the permissions, take photographs, create the drafts, prepare the mock-ups of the banknotes. When they are approved, start working on the engravings, and also request the substrates and issue the next denomination. So while one denomination, for example, the first one to be issued, it was the 500 pesos, which was presented on the latest quarter of 2018. So in the mid of this process, the process to design and produce the banknote, the 200 pesos note, was already starting. So actually what we will see is an overlap of different denominations, and this should be the sequential in which they should be, they were expected to be. So first the 500 pesos, then 200 pesos, then 1,000 pesos, which was supposed to be issued on on the second quarter of 2020, but it was delayed because of COVID. Then the 100 pesos, then 50 pesos, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. And then possibly, what they said is in 2020, we will start thinking whether we design and create the possible production and emission of 2,000 pesos. So I mentioned to you that when the Banco de Mexico issued these 500 pesos on 2018, there were some critics because of several things. First of all, because the 20 pesos note was not mentioned anymore. So they said basically what we are seeing is an inflationary process. So they are converting the 20 pesos bill into a coin, which that's actually happened in the past. And that was, according to some people, a clear sign of inflation, but also, and most importantly, the emission of a 2,000 pesos note, which is just being considered as part of this family, but the decision to issue it is not yet taken. So after the presentation of these 500 pesos, they said, okay, well, let's design also a 20 pesos note commemorative for the celebration of the independence, which will take place next year. So they added a 20 pesos note, which will be commemorative and would be the last 20 pesos in circulation. And they also revisit the calendar to issue those notes. So that was basically the program that was done. And I will talk a little bit about all this process. Just let me remind here the stages of a banknote and a banknote family, which were reflected on that calendar, most of them. The first part is the research. Then in the research, I also like very much what the designer of one of those notes told me, and that part of the research also includes what he called the concept design. It's not properly the design of the banknote, but is the concept that the central bank and different authorities help to create as the image that will have the banknote. So one is the concept design, all the research that has been done around, then the proper design and preparation of the banknote, the production, the printing of the banknote. They have to have larger enough quantities to be able to issue it and to put it in circulation. And finally, then we won't talk today about this, the withdrawal for destruction and the replacement or the banknotes. So let me start by how the research process took place according to the Banco de Mexico on the information that they created. I'll show you a set of slides that have a lot of information. I won't go on detail on every one of these, but just let me explain to you a little bit what is this. Each one of these slides reflects one studies, either it were theoretical or practical studies. On the right side, you will find the year and specifically what type of research they did. So there were some focus groups, although some work with experts on banknote production or experts on specific topics. Also, there were some surveys. So you will see basically here the type of research that the bank did. Normally, they try to be representative of the main cities and they try to have regional representation, also different type of people that in order to understand what is the relation with the banknotes. So the first study that they did is what are the unconscious codes that people identify with cash? So what is the relationship that people feel when they have cash? This is they actually represent something for the country. So people actually identify themselves with the country. They find this is a symbol. They find also something that it might be a symbol, but a personal symbol of achievement, because actually it's a result of an effort. They also, as I just told, it is a symbol of national unity, a social inclusion. They actually present an opportunity to communicate some messages, as Rukmini mentioned last time. And people actually already understood that banknotes have something in family and constitute families. They also, on this study, also found out that each banknote has a story to communicate and is associated with some specific historical events and personalities that actually tell something to people. And also another thing that is very interesting is that depending on the region and sometimes is a regional thing, sometimes is a matter of gender, but there are some different rituals that people have with the banknotes. People do not store the banknotes the same way depending on gender, or also they have a different type of relationship when they take a banknote on their hands. And so basically there are some rituals that are individual and there are some other shared rituals that the bank tries to communicate in order to people to pay attention on the banknotes, on the authenticity of the banknotes, and also to take care of the banknotes. No? For example, in Mexico, they used to staple banknotes when someone got the payment in cash, and with the introduction of polymer banknotes, you know that people tear apart, banknotes tear apart if you staple them. So the bank started a communication campaign to avoid that. So this is part of the first approach that the bank did, to say how people actually identify themselves with banknotes. Then the next study that they created is to prove security features, because as you know, every central bank selects a bunch of security features for the banknotes. They go between 7 to even more than 20 different security features. And actually they said, okay, well, do actually people know those safety features, how they take how they see them, they actually look for them. Are they confident enough when they receive a banknote? And they figure out that, first of all, people do not necessarily pay attention to security features. And particularly, they pay attention for larger denominations, not for smaller ones. What they say is that normally cash transaction is very quick. So if there is no a large quantity of money, they actually are not paying attention to them. So, but also there is also some ignorance, because not everyone knows all the security features. And another thing that was interesting, and I like very much this finding, is that people actually do not pay attention to faces. I recall that American Banknote Company, which is a company that I like very much to study, actually said that faces were particularly hard to reproduce, and it was relatively easy for people to identify when a banknote was forged, because the face was not necessarily reproduced equally. Well, what they found in this study is that they do not necessarily pay attention to faces, and they classified and sorry if these images have some text in Spanish, but it's actually, I took them from the studies themselves. And they said, okay, well, there are some very frequent security features that are being used. Also, they actually tested both the polymer banknotes and the cotton-based substrates. There are some that are less frequently used, and there are some security features that people actually do not pay attention at all. But what they say on these studies, they were only reviewing security features that were already in the banknotes, not new security features. So they also did a second study, which actually tried to show different types of people new security features that could be included on the banknotes, and actually some of them were easier for people to recognize, for example, latitude or spark, and others were not necessarily that on the preference of the people. And from this study on, most of the studies try to create some recommendations to the Banco de Mexico, just to explain what would be ideal for the group of people that participate in this study. Some of these recommendations are contradictory between different studies. Some of them were followed, and some others were not actually followed, no? As we may imagine. No? So basically, for example, this study said, okay, if you use a single material, it will be easier. We will see another study a little bit later that says that actually keeping polymer and cotton-based substrates it was actually better. Also, what I'm highlighting here in yellow are things that at the end the bank decided to actually take into consideration. What people said is the banknotes are very crowded right now. They have too many elements, and too many security elements that people do not necessarily pay attention to. So let's focus on two easily identified elements and put a lot of attention to that. Actually, another recommendation is that the last one here is, in order for people to understand the security features, you have to put them on a very attractive name. If you tell them that this is rolling cube or rapid motion or horizon, they will actually not pay attention to that. The commercial names that the companies put to those security features actually do not tell anything to the people, but you have to select something specifically. Another thing that I found very interesting is this create a navigating map. Let me go back to this slide. As you can see here on the image of this mock-up of the 500 pesos on the left, on bottom left, people when they take a banknote, they actually pay 1 or 2 seconds. Pay attention to the banknote 1 or 2 seconds, and normally, as I mentioned to you, there are some rituals of the people. They do a navigation map. So what the recommendation said was try to put the elements, the main elements, in a way in which you can follow a flow and not make people to go from one side to the banknote to the other. No, so try to make a very simple navigation map, because people do not pay attention to much of that. Also, they said take more try to make more out of the faces, because the faces can help you to see where people has to see. Also use more the banknotes to tell a story, and demystify that the security features should not be reviewed. Another study that was made, and I like this one very much, is the haptic and visual perception. So how people actually take and use the banknotes, and they try to test the impression of people if they switch colors and if they switch the orientation of the banknotes. So, and I think that they use these mock-ups that are actually designed also by people from the Bank of Mexico. And one of the things that this study recommends is the same size and location of the numbers, because people already identified those places. Preserve, and this is what I was telling you, that the contradictory information between the previous study and this one, because this one says preserve polymer for easy identification, because if you have two denominations in polymer and the other four in cotton-based substrate, you will actually identify very easily, at least between them, contrary to the other study that recommended a single substrate. Another point is keep the current color gamut. I think it was people already is very familiar with the gamut of colors, and this is something that has been kept on the previous. People already know that the pink one is the 50 pesos, the green one is the 200, the 20 was blue. So what they say is do not change the color gamut. Also, they suggested to increase the size difference, because actually size for visually impaired people, the size is very easily to identify the denomination, because other features like tactile features actually disappear when the banknote is highly used and worn. And they also recommend the composition of a visual map. And also what they said is, if you put an image like the wolf here on that is actually looking at you, it actually creates a very interesting interaction between the person and the banknote. So they suggested to use more the faces in order to try to create a sensation for the user. As I mentioned to you, they invited experts from different banknote designers, producers, suppliers, in order inks, for example, inks, substrates. And the idea here was to meet those people with the designers of the Bank of Mexico to talk about the trends and what were the newest ideas on the banknote production. This happened in 2015. So what I told that at the beginning, one of the concerns is that this actually gets a little bit out there, because some denominations were released 5 years after that, and some of them are still not released. So they also created a group of multidisciplinary people which were gathered in order to make sure that the elements that were selected were actually accurate in terms of the history that we wanna, or the bank that wanted to present, in terms of the cultural element that actually made sense. Some so people from social sciences and natural sciences were invited to the whole process. So there were many workshops between experts between 2014 that they were only talking about the general theme of the banknotes, to 2020, when they were actually showing specific designs of a specific denomination, just to make sure throughout the process that the elements that were selected were accurate, in order to that some critics could actually complain that what is portrayed on a banknote is actually not necessarily accurate. So this was not necessarily one workshop. It was part of a process that involved all these people, and I only mentioned the main institutions, but actually there were more. There were universities, public institutions, and some actual experts on specific topics that were taken into consideration over this process. They also said, let's review how we've done so far. And they compared two banknote families, the family B and the family F. The F is the one that is being phased out right now. The family B, it was the last part of the first of the new pesos, which is actually the same design as the large denominations that were issued on the 20s, which actually lost a bit the historical sequence that the factory tried to do when they began printing banknotes here in Mexico. And the idea was to identify what the people that actually used those notes and people that didn't use those notes, that they are younger people that were not necessarily users, or when these notes were in circulations, particularly the B family, what does the banknote tell to them? What the characters, the places, the objects selected transmit to them? What also is, if there are some cultural or historical elements that actually provide them identity, and what was the specific link of the individual to each one of the banknotes. And what they found is that people that participated in this process said that the selection criteria and for the elements selected on each one of the bank kind of random. It actually didn't have a consistency on the process to elements for each one of the nodes. So they said, okay, well, one day they decide to select some things, and for another denomination others. So basically there is no consistency. Also, they said, okay, basically the criteria for selecting artistic works is also not necessarily clear to us. We actually do not necessarily understand why these people were selected, and why are these elements of design selected for the banknotes. No, they also complain about too many elements to be included in the banknotes. Basically, when the research was done, they selected a bunch of things and they said, and try to create a composition with everything. And another thing they said is, well, composition what are producing is that they are distorting reality, because they're creating stuff that actually do not exist. That, for example, the 20,000 pesos, which later was the 20 new pesos banknotes on the family B, actually had some parts of murals from Bonampak and from another site, and actually it seemed on the banknote that this is a single piece, which actually is a composition from stuff that are present in two different archaeological sites on the Mayan zone. So what they try to explain on this study is that actually sometimes the banknote is distorted reality on the creation of these elements. Also, when they say when you make a very small design of something, actually you affect the fidelity of the actual object. And finally, what they said is there is no consistency or coherence between the front and the back. Of course, I'm not going to explain all this information here, but after all this information, they presented three different theme proposals for the banknotes, and one of them had two variations. One was natural heritage, the second is the influence of arts, and the final one is history again. So what they said, okay, is they selected 6 elements for the front and 6 elements from the back on each one of these themes. The first one, with natural heritage, was properly nature, and the idea was ecosystems on the front, and the backs were some heritage, cultural and natural sites. The variation of this theme is the same front, but in the back, rather than presenting only the natural heritage, they focus more on the sustainable production of some stuff in terms of fishing, in terms of, for example, mezcal production or lumber or agriculture. So the reverse could, the back of the note would have a variation of what was supposed to be presented. On the arts, they selected people representing the fine arts on the front, and some places on the back that could also be representative of the different fine arts. And for the historical view or theme, they actually presented some different processes, both for the front of the back. So after that, they tested these ideas with the general public. They did some surveys and focus groups, and they asked people to rate what would be their preference on the thematic for each one of the banknotes. Now, something that is interesting is that the natural heritage was simplified into one version, and the arts was actually divided into two. So they said, okay, well, it is not the same talking about fine arts or popular arts, no, arts and crafts. So they split the second proposition, and what they found is that history again was the most preferred by the general public, then the arts and crafts, and then natural heritage. Actually, fine arts were not necessarily interesting for the people that participate in those surveys. Something that is interesting is that every group actually selected for each one of these ideas, and some of them, for example, natural heritage, they said, oh yeah, it would boost the tourism, they would have an attractive design, show diversity of the country, will have ecological awareness. In terms of the arts and crafts, they said, well, it's a change, a new image, it will show the rituals and traditions of the country. And for example, for history, they said, okay, well, we will keep heroes, and they like the idea of creating a chronological sequences. Obviously, for history, they say this is same as usual, this is boring. But the others, actually, normally the constant critic is, we don't like the selection criteria. They are not representative. Why don't we put, rather than using the jaguar, why don't we put the solo squinkler? Or rather than using, I don't know, Diego Rivera, why don't we put Pedro Infante or Juan Rulfo or another character? So again, the selection criteria and the representativeness of the different elements were one kind of an element of a divergence. And normally what people is more used is history, and they already have the processes, so it's relatively easy to follow. Now, something that is interesting is that they actually people, there were some people that said, okay, well, why do you use new characters? And they suggested Cárdenas, José Ortiz de Domínguez, the kids that defended the Chapultepec Castle when we had the U.S. invasion in the 19th century, Cuauhtémoc. These figures, most of the figures that were actually suggested, were already either of the numismatic history in Mexico, either on banknotes, which Cárdenas, José Ortiz, and the Niños Héroes or Cuauhtémoc, or also on some coins. So it's interesting that people actually suggested characters that were already used on banknotes or coins before. There were only few characters that were never used on any coin or banknote. For example, Porfirio Diaz, Subcomandante Marcos, or Guadalupe Victoria. Well, actually, Victoria was used in a coin. So with this information, they tried to say, okay, well, if we, do you like colors? And they found the colors of the current family, the 500 is the 1000 should be brighter because it's a really significant denomination and should be paid more attention to it. Do you like series, signatures, letters, dates on the front or on the back? People actually don't care. Do you like vertical or horizontal? Actually, people were open to the idea of having vertical notes. And they say, well, why don't you have one side vertical and the other one horizontal, as we see in other countries? Using more than one portrait, as I just mentioned, there were many names thrown of people that could represent a different historical events. Okay, well, we can accept more than one. The problem is that it would be attractive, but too crowded. In terms of historical sense, they also suggested new episodes that were not necessarily considered before. And one of the questions or critics is that, well, this is the story of the people that won, not necessarily. So it might be a distorted image of the story. There was the suggestion to put snakes on the 2000 on the nominations, and people actually do not like the snakes unless it is with an eagle, because the Mexico's national symbol is an eagle eating a snake. So they don't like necessarily snakes, and there are some very nice banknotes portraying snakes. But anyway. They also tested some security elements, and the ones in green are the ones preferred by the people. So people preferred rapid motion than rolling cube, or the top and hologram rather than horizontal. So this is what people actually felt more attractive and easily to recognize. So reduce the number of options. They tested natural heritage, history, or a combination of natural heritage and history, and the combination was the option that was much more that had more votes. And obviously there were some pros, cons, and they suggested other stuff to portray on the banknotes, but basically here, the idea of combining the two main themes was the most important. Just for you to know, this was the type of card. So they were not necessarily presenting ideal banknotes, like mock-up of banknotes or draft designs. They were just saying, okay, in the front, we can have this information. On the back, we can have that information. So they only put some pictures and names of places or characters. And this is how people rated the theme that was supposed to be part of the banknotes. So, and the last part of this theoretical research was tactile features. By law, the Bank of Mexico needs to consider visually impaired people, and they did workshops and focus groups in 2 years in a row, in 2016 and 17, just to test what was more useful for blind people to better recognize the denominations. So obviously the size is the best measure to identify them. What they found is what I mentioned before: the tactile features are better for when you have a new banknote. When a banknote is worn, not necessarily it is easy to identify. You don't need to, you have to actually select very well where you put those features, because if you put it on the center of the banknote, as a banknote is being folded, it will not necessarily be identifiable. So they created this map. So interesting that at the bottom right and basically close to the corners, each is when blind people can identify. And they actually tested different marks. And what they say is they prefer lines than figures. And if they are going to select lines, try longer lines rather than small lines. So I found interesting those findings. With all this process, they came to this new banknote family, and they call it historical identity and natural heritage. As you can see here, they give us just a glimpse on the colors that they will use for each one of the denominations and the idea that there will be different sizes. So they came to this infographic, which is how we started this presentation. And the idea is to showcase that the fronts will have a representation of 6 historical processes in chronological order. So the 50 pesos will showcase the ancient Mexico, the 100 pesos the colony, and the independence in the 200 pesos, the reform and restoration of the republic on the 500, the revolution on the 1000, and if the 2000 pesos is issued, it will showcase the contemporary Mexico, as I mentioned, in chronological orders. And the backs will represent ecosystems, 6 different ecosystems, with examples of flora and fauna, and all of them will showcase one cultural World Heritage site. So I think that this has been a topic of interest within the group, so I thought this was interesting. So the idea is that each one of the notes will have this. So basically, we have all the research, and I promise you that this part will be much easier. I won't take that much time, but I found really interesting all the information that was presented on the bank on how this research, and sorry, I didn't translate here at the bottom the name, how this research was done. Now, on terms of preparation and design, basically, once they have the theme, they have to select the portraits and the vignettes. They needed to do some field visits by designers and engravers in order to have a grasp, as we described last session, on exactly how the place that they want to showcase on the banknote looks like, and the ecosystem, how the animals that will be shown are part of the landscape. If they wanted to use a historical photograph, they needed to obtain permission, the copyright. So, and I mentioned this because actually this is part of how I tracked part of the information of this. I went to the transparency site of Banco de Mexico, and as they actually do not disclose the name of the designers of the engravers, but they do have a directory, and they also have these reports that every official from the bank does when they travel to some places. So I know that one person that actually has the title of designer of banknotes at the bank went to Cabo, to Las Vizcaínas or to Michoacán, where is the place that where that is portrayed on the banknote, and then wait to prepare the new denomination. So basically, connecting the dots is how I managed to identify who the designer is or are, who are the designers, and the engravers, because they actually went to each one of the places showcased to have a grasp on the idea. And they need to prepare the sketches, create focus groups with experts and general public to make sure that the general public actually likes the design and accepts the denomination, and actually with the experts, as I mentioned before, just to make sure that what they are is actually true. Prepare the engravings, integrate security measures, and also request the supplies, because you know that the banknotes are printed on a substrate, but the substrate needs to have the watermark or the windows, and also they have to request the inks specifically for the colors. They selected different images of the characters that were supposed to be shown, on also the historical processes, the animals that were going to be presented. they created these focus groups and surveys with all this information, and people selected which portraits liked the most. Something that is interesting is normally the portraits selected or that rank the most is those that were already part of banknotes, and actually the most recent ones, because for example these two on the bottom, I don't know if you my cursor, but from Miguel Hidalgo, the two images on the right actually were already used in banknotes, and the one that people prefer is the one that is on the right side, because it's the one that is closest to the image used on the latest. The three images of those were already used in banknotes, like these paintings were reproduced in banknotes, and the one that people selected is the one that looks closest to the latest version of the banknotes. So basically, they did these qualitative studies. This information is also part of the transparency website of Banco de Mexico, and they created the sketches. These were the sketches proposed for the 500 pesos. They try here two different portraits, one in three quarters and one looking into the front, different historical processes, and different positions where the whale was portrayed. Also, for the first denomination, they tried vertical, either horizontal. And again, the results of this focus group is, they said any of these we would be using. One thing that was not surprising is that say, yeah, but well, it is blue and it has Benito Juarez. It would be confused with the 20 pesos banknotes, because actually it has the one that is still in circulation has Benito Juarez and is blue. So they said, okay, well, it has a modern design. It is on cotton-based substrate rather than polymer. Nevertheless, actually confused with that 20 pesos. From the different historical scenes, they selected the vignette of Juarez with a triumphal entry into the city. What they said is they have some small text below and said, well, they must be placed in a position where it actually explains either the character or the process, the specific process, because microtext in current banknotes were not necessarily put in a place where it actually explain what the character was or the vignette was showing. There was no preference for a particular portrait. People do not care if the signatures are in the front or the back, and they actually liked because it showed an ecological message and an identity message on Mexico's history. This is about the production process. It's from the production of substrate in 3D features to all the printing process and the put in circulation. So basically, I don't necessarily need to go into detail. This is just to showcase how the polymer is made. But basically, what I want to showcase here is that the two smaller denominations, the 50 and the 100 pesos, will be made on Guardian substrates by CCL Secure. Actually, when they decided that the commemorative 20 pesos was going to be issued, they also said that it will be in polymer. And then from 200 to 1000 pesos and the 2000 pesos, if issued, will also be on cotton-based substrate. And from the contracts that are on the public side of the Banco de Mexico, they are purchasing it to Arjo Wiggins, Crane, and Luisenthal. And the security measures that they are requesting is Rapid and Multicode from Crane and Luisenthal. So these are the security features that will be part of all the notes, and that actually we're already seeing on those that are in circulation. On the presentation of the last banknotes, they showed images of one of the engravers doing the computer engraving. We are not doing anymore the boring engraving as they used to. It is now all computer engraved. they showed some images of the printing process. I don't know if you can see here clearly, but actually they are wearing masks because the production of the last denomination was done during the over the last months, and actually the factory was closed a few months because of the confinement. So they showed how the process was already with the new safety measures in order to reduce the risk of COVID-19. So this is a 5-year introduction program. The first denomination was issued, the 500 pesos was issued on September 2018, the 200 on August 2019. Then the 100, they switched places. They launched the 100 pesos before the 1,000 pesos, but both of them were issued on November, I think it was 11 or 12 for the 100 pesos, and November 19 for the 1,000 pesos. So basically we have 4 denominations already from the current banknote family. I like very much some of them, but let me just, so let me just go a couple of more slides. When they were trying these in-depth studies, and these 2 slides are part of the process when we were not yet presented the banknotes. This presentation actually had these slides in order to show what would be the features that would be presented on the banknotes. But I kept this image because of it actually shows at the beginning they wanted to have only 2 portraits, Carmen Cerdán and Madero, and then they decided to include Hermila Galindo, and they presented different images on how to portray them, 3 at the same level, with one in the front and the other 2 in the back, who would be in the front. And actually, as you can see in this image, you have they selected the image with letter E for the banknote, which is here from all the combinations that they found. Also, for the 100 pesos, they kept this image because of trying to identify what was the image that was selected. And so, and I kept both the slides because in this case, they actually do not use any of the vignettes that were presented for the historical process. If you can see here, you have an image on the banknote. We have an image of the interior of San Ildefonso, and these were not the buildings that were showed here. So basically, also an interesting part is that even if the designers have some ideas on what to portray on the banknotes, when they test these ideas on these focus groups, and they might switch some of the designs. Basically, these are the 4 fronts. We have some commonalities, and I wanted to show this image because of things that actually do have some things in common. But I think that there is also an evolution of this family. The first one, that was the 500, actually had like very marked colors. No, we have this blue part with Benito Juarez and some yellow parts here. The design it looks more like pasted. This 100 is my impression that it looks more integrated. And then the 1000, which is also in the same substrate, actually has some new elements. So even though all of them have the numeral with this spark life security feature, and they all have this rapid motion and the tactile figures, the position of the numbers, they are in common in all these denominations. The 1000 has this rosette at the background that is actually absent on the others. It has not a vignette, a specific vignette as the 200 and the 500, but actually it has a locomotive on the back. And I think it's interesting because actually it shows an evolution. So it actually doesn't have the same elements or the same commonalities as integrated, and it shows that even though they all belong to the same family, they are not necessarily exactly the same. So they were, it shows that they were not necessarily designed at the same moment. Also, if you see the 100, which it has a different format, they decided that the polymer ones will be vertical and the cotton-based will be horizontal. If we see some of the elements, they actually do share this position of the 100, and they have the same feature of a spark life, but actually it's in a different position. If we put on horizontal this banknote, the two serial numbers will be in inverse position, and these elements, these lines that were on the security thread are present in the 100 and the 500 and 200, but are absent absolutely on the 100, and they are not necessarily clear for the 1000. Unfortunately, I haven't found any 1000 yet on the bank to actually take a look at the banknote and compare it myself. For the backs, also, they actually look more similar, but we can see much more color on the 100 and the 1000 compared to the two previous denominations. We can, if you want, we can go a little bit more on detail. I will give you very quickly 5 facts of the new family. One of them is the signatures. Well, we have different dates. This shouldn't be signatures, actually is the dates. So far we found 7 dates for the 500, 4 in the 200, 1 on the 100 and 1 in 1000 pesos. This actually the chronology that I showed at the very beginning, and an interesting fact is that the very first date on the 500 pesos actually is before the last date that appears on the other banknote family. So I think that was an interesting fact. In terms of signatures, the very first date, has shows the signatures of the composition that was of the Board of Governors that was presented in 2017. By February 2018, they actually had a couple of changes. The person that on the last deputy governor was appointed governor, so his signature, rather than appear at the end of the sequence, it appears at the beginning, and we have a new deputy governor, the first female deputy governor on the history of the bank. By November 2018, we have only 3 signatures rather than 5, and this is something fun because Roberto del Cueto resigned, but the date of the note actually is before the date of the resignation took effect. So I suppose his signature should be on those notes and is absent. And actually, Manuel Ramos Francia was ending his period in December of that year, but actually also after the date of the banknote. So I think that both signatures are missing, and surely is because they printed the notes after they were not at the bank anymore. Nevertheless, in proper form, I think that both the signatures should have been present on that date. And then from January and then June 2019, the board was again complete with 2 new deputy ministers. Something that is interesting is on December 2020, Javier Guzman, which is the second position here, is ending his term, and we are expecting the president to appoint a new deputy governor. The rumors said that it will be another woman, so we will have 2 female deputy governors on the board of directors, and on December 22nd, we will have a new governor appointed by the president. So new signatures in the foreseeable future. On the back of the notes, we have some small numbers in micro printing. I don't know if you can see on the back of the notes. Here we have a C9, and actually my theory is that it goes to the position on the note on the full sheet of notes. That actually only appears on the paper on the cotton-based substrate. With 100 pesos, I haven't found any of those numbers printed on the background. Also, the 200 pesos has a commemorative legend only on 200 million notes from prefixes AL to BF. The others are without this legend of the anniversary of the autonomy of the bank. And the last one is the augmented reality. All this family has some images of augmented reality. If you want to download, the app is Billetes MX, which is an app developed by the Bank of Mexico. And actually, it helps you to identify some elements, security elements of the banknotes. It shows you all the UV iridescent images that appear when you put the banknote on a UV light, but also has this feature that is very interesting, that if you put any note on with your camera on the cell phone, you can see those images on both on the front on. I don't know if you want me to show. I have some images here, but I already took more than 1 hour. So if I might leave this if you're interested for the Q&A session. The next denomination is the next denomination will be the 20 pesos commemorative one, but no image has been shown so far. Right now, the only one that has been presented is the image, this photography from the Bank of Mexico saying we're working on the new 50 pesos with an axolotl. This will be the animal portrait on the back, and we have the images that was used for the 2,000 pesos note, just to make sure that if there is a need of issuing this image, these are the images that are being taken into consideration for showing the contemporary Mexico with this 2,000 pesos denomination. As you can see, all of this information, and you can go into the Banco de Mexico website, and you can see all the documents, almost 30 documents available that you can browse on, and you can have all the detailed information that I try to compress in a single hour. So I think I'll leave it here. I know it was a very lengthy presentation, and I hope that that gave you the sense of what is the process and how long does it take, all the people that gets involved, and how complex a process of creating a banknote family is. Even us that are familiar or more familiar with some of these processes, we do not necessarily realize how complex this process is. And I think that I try to put everything together just to explain. And I think it was very interesting to have Banco de Mexico putting all this information to the access of the general public. So thank you very much. And Fabricio, if there is anyone still on we can go for Q&A if someone wants to share their opinion and to comment some things on the presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Cedrian. Thank you very much. It was really interesting to see what it goes behind. I don't know, we went a little bit over 1 hour, but it's just us and your presentation, so we could have gone as much as we wanted, no problem at all. Yeah, I can open to Q&A. So you guys, if you want to ask questions, just unmute yourself. Roger, you may need to type. I'll read it in case, and I'll start with the first one. of all the stages you presented, Cedrian, what would you say is the most difficult or the longest one? Of the
Sorry, can you repeat this?
Of the 5 stages you presented on the creation of a banknote, what would be the most difficult or longest?
I think that the first one, because actually you still don't have idea of what is what you wanna say. So is the one that actually has most changes. As I told you, there were some themes, many things that were presented, and they were still figuring out. Okay, well, let's put nature on them. Okay, what about nature? Is it like actually natural sites and flora and fauna, or let's put something about sustainability? And then when they present the next stage of the process, nature was reduced to one of those visions, but then the arts actually was split into 2, into arts and crafts and fine arts. So basically at this stage, at the very early stage, when you're creating this concept design, you're actually trying to figure out what's happening and what you want to present. You don't necessarily have the full information of what you have. And then on the other processes, it's more like a fine tuning. You already have the concept, you already have all the information, and you have just to change whether you like this portrait or the other, but you have a closer selection. So each time I think you narrow down the options, contrary to the very process in which you have all the options available.
Thank you. Any other questions, guys?
I think that Alex, go ahead, Rukmini.
Yeah, thanks, Cedrian. It was really nice. I come from the same thought because this is a process that as a brand designer, we follow a similar protocol. So it's nice to see that this protocol is followed and it's also shared in the public domain. So my question is actually regarding that, that since how long was this information available on the bank's website? Was it after the process, or was it during, or was it from the beginning? What were the timelines of the information availability?
That's a very good question. Actually, it was after the project, and my impression is that it was because there was a lot of critics of the bank that the image of the 500 pesos, let me show you this
was
one.
It something to do with that Twitter image that you started with, or
no? The image, this note was released on August or September 2018, and the image was leaked on social media in March. Apparently, and this is a completely extra official. Apparently, when they were doing the tests with the ATMs, and they were, you know, that the bank, in order to be able to launch, and I didn't talk about that process because it's not part of what the bank released, but when you have to release that amount of banknotes, you need to inform all the financial institutions, and you have to adapt the ATMs in order to make sure that the ATMs will be able to withdraw and deposit notes with these features. So they sign contracts with each one of the banks, and they have some confidentiality contracts in order to use banknotes to test the machines and to prove all of this. And one of the, I don't know if it was one of the tellers or one of the people on the security, transportation companies, that actually took a picture of it and uploaded to the network. So that happened with the very first denomination. Actually, it also happened 1 week before, and that was like months, like I think it was on March, and the release was in September or August or September. So a few months before the issuance of the banknote, the image was leaked. For the 200 pesos, it was also leaked, but it was only 1 week before. And I think that the bank, in order to make sure that, how to explain that? In order to say, okay, well, we're fully transparent on the process. This is how the process took place. So after the release of 500, they released a bunch of documents. And each time that a new banknote is being released, they are actually updating the information, and they are including new documents and updating those that are already available, just to make sure that the calendar is more complete. But my impression is that they did that in order to reduce the critics, and also in order to say, okay, well, put everything online. People won't actually read it. They don't expect to have one Cedrian. They will spend some weeks browsing on the website and figuring all this information out. But it was after the first denomination was released, and
Because
it's still
actually
available.
on the on the European Central Bank, and because my thesis focused specifically on the euro, they have a continuous assessment and evaluation, and they kind of still keep testing security features, visibility for whatever, all kinds of interactions by public and by users of the currency notes. And every few months, every 6 odd months, now I haven't been there recently, findings that are regularly published in an open, forum of the European Central Bank. And that is why my question to you was that, is it an ongoing process or was it a one time, and what was the timing? That was the reason I asked. But thank you. But I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, and I'm sorry if I was speaking very quickly, but as you know, there was a lot of information. I think that Mexico is much more conservative on that regard. They don't like giving information ahead. The only thing, and it was new to us, was these infographics in which they presented some ideas on what the contents of how the banknotes will look like. And again, that was also after the first denomination was issued. So I think it was more like an after crisis reaction after the first note was leaked, not necessarily that they changed the approach, because they are very conservative and they don't like to give information in advance. Hopefully they will change for future families, but right now it's more like a reactive, not necessarily a proactive action.
Actually, just one more comment, and Fabrizio may be familiar. So there is the museum at the Bank of Japan, and I visited last April, which was April of 2019, and they had the 4 new denomination designs that they are going to launch in 2024. So obviously security features were not mentioned, but the actual image of the notes and how they would appear on the main elements is already up in a public domain. I was quite surprised because it was at that point 5 years earlier to the actual launch, but they wanted to familiarize people with the images, and I thought that was interesting. I mean, I didn't know if I would have taken that approach, but yeah.
It's a different approach.
They must have been preparing this banknote for only God knows how long.
Yes, and I think that gives consistency on the design, and I like very much those Japanese notes that will be issued in 2004. My impression, and as I showed on one of the last slides, is that the bank is still figuring out. Also, another aspect that I know is that the bank designers and engravers are transitioning from the previous era to the new era. So we have new designers, we have new engravers, so we can see that, and they are still testing. They didn't have the idea of having 3 portraits on the 1,000 note. Actually, they had only 2. But when the 500 was released, and when the 200 was released, and having Hidalgo and Morelos rather than Sor Juana, people started complaining about the number of women on the banknotes. So they said, okay, well, let's put another woman on the 1,000. So I think it was in order to, so it's part of a creation process that actually has some reactions, and they need to react accordingly. And I think that we don't know exactly what will be shown on the 20 pesos, but there will be some differences from these notes, even though the only information that we know is that it will be vertical and polymer.
Great. Thanks, Cedrian.
Sergey wants to ask.
I have a question. Hello, everyone. Hi, Cedrian. Nice to see you. First time. And very thanks for great presentation. Very deep and expensive research. I appreciate it. I even shared some screenshots with my Ukrainian community in Ukrainian group, and they already say wow, because we don't have in Ukraine so deep research about banknotes, and it is hidden from the citizen, from the collectors. Every note which were issued by our central bank is surprise for us. So it's very interesting to see how other banks do in the world. And my question, maybe not question, but I wish to, can you show us 1,000 banknotes, because everyone in the world, every collector, especially I, waiting from you this the first exchange. I need newest Mexican notice to complete my sets. So my question is, do you have a lucky to find it already or no?
Not yet. Actually, I've been going over the past 2 weeks. I've been going to at least 25 different branches, and none of them has still the banknotes. It's interesting. Apparently, they only put 2 million banknotes in circulation. So they printed 45 million, but only 2 million are in circulation. So as the central bank is still working remotely, my friends at the central bank haven't been able to get me a copy of or at least one of those. So I'm still figuring out. I'm going from one bank to the other. Right now, I'm in a different city. I'm not in Mexico City. I'm in Cuernavaca. So I will try to go to an ATM, because on Saturday their branches are closed. But I will try to go to an ATM just to figure out whether I'm lucky enough to get some copies of the 1,000. But I don't have it yet on my hands.
Okay, we already realized that a very good theoretical research, and I wish you good luck in practical searches.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sergey.
Cedrian, 2 questions coming from the chat.
Yeah.
I'll read both of them, then you can answer one by one. So, has the Bank of Mexico considered fully switching to polymer notes? First question. And the second one is, where is the second one? Can movement be portrayed using UV light?
Interesting. Okay, so let me respond to the first one. I think that the Bank of Mexico is exploring all the possibilities. I asked this same question, and I know that this is Alex who asked, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think he has made this question a couple of times. I discussed with the former manager of the banknote printing factory a few weeks ago, and I asked him whether it would be convenient for the bank, and he said, well, imagine that people actually do not use necessarily large denomination banknotes. Actually, one of the critics of issuing a 2,000 pesos is that actually people do not accept the 1,000 pesos banknote. So you can still see in very good shape banknotes from 2002 of 1,000 pesos. Even though this family, the D1 family is being phasing out, you can still see in circulation some of those banknotes in very good shape, because actually people do not use them. So what is the point, as he explained to me, what is the point of creating a high durable banknote that will cost the double if you do not necessarily need to extend the life of this banknote because this banknote is in very good shape. So basically, I think that they made the analysis and they found that it makes sense for lower denomination, not done necessarily for large denominations, because people actually are using more the lower denominations. Nevertheless, my question is that the banknote that is most in circulation is the 500s. So the 500, we can see we can see many notes that are well worn already, and he told me when I asked him about when I reverted to him about why don't we switch to at least to 200 or 500, and he said yes, but you have a production process that takes 2, 3, 4 years, and if you consider that the time that we just spoke about, and you start replacing the notes, I don't know, 8 years later, you have to think that you're still printing banknotes with one date that will be issued, because we also have to take into consideration that the bank has some inventories that they print the inventories and they kept it until they are being released. So you will have printed notes that will last still 8 years, or actually the 100 pesos. I think that the 500 pesos lasts 72 months or 80 months in circulations at least. So basically, to duplicate the time of circulation of those notes actually will extend the time of switching the whole family. And they said, no, in order to improve security measures, we cannot afford waiting that long, because you know that there was already a forgery of a polymer notes in Mexico. So basically what the bank is calculating is not necessarily sorry, is not necessarily switching the larger denomination. So I think that they consider it and they decided not to release other denominations. I think it will be gradually, and the ecological perspective, I don't know if at some point will push for having 3 or more denominations, but at this stage they are only considering the low denominations, and which will be 50, 100, and the commemorative 20. And the second question was about movement with using UV. Well, actually, I think that I don't know. I don't know exactly if I assume that the question was done related to the augmented reality, right, Roger? Let me.
Roger, need to type. Hold on, because
Okay, yeah. Because and let me just show you the. I don't know if he was mentioning about movement. He was thinking on this. You can see the butterflies moving here. I don't know if he was mentioning anything related to this. I think it's even more funnier on the 1,000 pesos. Sorry, I cannot. I'm not able to. Here. So this is the reality on the. and on the when you have the reverse, you have a monkey here that is moving, and then you have the jaguar that is trying to hunt him.
Wow. You are muted, Cedrian. You are muted.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know how I did that. So I don't know if movement, if using UV light can show movement. I'm not quite sure. I think that the inks that are currently being used are fixed ones. And actually the augmented reality is not something on the banknote itself, it's something on the software that the cell phone has. Actually, if you, something that is interesting is that if you take a photocopy of the banknotes and put the app, this app on in order to be able to see the images, you will be able to see all these images on augmented reality, even with a photocopy or even with half of a banknote. If you only have half of banknotes, it will still detect that. So it's not something that it has to. It is related to the inks, the UV inks that are used on the banknotes. But I wonder whether at some point this technology will evolve that much, and we will be able to have some augmented reality also using UV light. I think it might be possible, but I don't think it is used right now.
But that means the augmented reality is more for fun than for security.
It's actually it's only for fun. They do have a disclaimer that this app does not authenticate banknotes. I think at the origin of the project, it was the intention to use this app to authenticate banknotes. I don't know why they decided to eliminate that part. So right now it's only, and actually there was confusing and contradictory information, because when the Minister of Finance the next day the 500 or 2000 the 200 note was presented, the Minister of Finance used the app in order to showcase the features that were available, and he said it was to authenticate banknotes. And so actually the Minister of Finance was saying it was for authentication purposes, and then the bank had to correct him and said, no, this is not to authenticate, this is only to show other features and make people to get more involved and to have more interaction between the individual and the banknotes, but it is not to authenticate. I think that some countries are actually developing apps to authenticate, to prove that it's an authentic note, but not in the case of Banco de Mexico.
Guys, any more questions?
Yes, Cedrian, Sheetal.
Yep.
Yes, I have a quick question, Bruce here. You said that this motion is really for fun, but not for security. Well, I would disagree with that, because what you're looking at are angle, shifting inks, which are not trivial to produce. It's based on some very special nanotechnology, particle physics. So I would also consider that an added security measure, not just entertainment. For my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, Bruce. Actually, you are fully right. When I was mentioned that it was for fun, I was referring to the augmented reality. Not every single motion feature on this. If we consider the short life, or we consider the motion, rapid motion, the feature, all that specifically is for security purposes. You are absolutely right. But I was only talking about the augmented reality. But good point. I think that Shita also wanted to say something.
Yes.
Yes, Cedrian. A great presentation. So lots to learn. Thanks for this. My my story comes back down to the choice of the denominations, really, Cedrian. So I heard you earlier as well, and I heard you today of the reason of why they chose not to have a denomination 20. As much as we respect them, I remain intrigued by that, really. Probably coming from India, it remains intriguing for me because if you just try to convert things, right, 20 might sound low, but going by the conversion rates, almost to a US dollar, right? And if we just look at the India side of the story, we have 50, 20, and 10, which are pretty relevant. And if you really look at Mexico and just do a conversion one-on-one, it comes down to about 70 Indian rupees. And we seem to have 3 denominations below those for 20. And inflation probably could be similar. So as much as different people look at different way to inflation and purchasing power parity and many other parameters, really, it's pretty intriguing for me to think somebody wants to drop a 20 note from Mexico. You have any?
Yeah, they are switching the 20 bill to a 20 coin. And actually, we had some commemorative 20 pesos coins before, which are really interesting for the numismatic community. This year, they produced a new commemorative as well, 20 pesos coin, but from different materials, which is much cheaper. So I think that they are also taking into consideration the cost of producing those denominations and the time it will last, because a 20 pesos coin will last, I don't know, 5-6 times the time of banknotes. No, we still can have some new pesos denominated coins in circulation, which were issued in 1992, and you can still see in circulation right now. So I think it's an economic perspective. They consider the purchase parity. I think that this is one of the elements, but also the cost of production and the time that the note or the coin will last. So I think the bank actually has a large team that is taking all these elements into consideration, and they have actuaries figuring out what would be the best mix in order to have it. So 20 pesos is not that much in Mexico. I know it's $1, but you have not necessarily many things that cost below 20 pesos here in Mexico, unless you have a chewing gum or something. So life is a bit expensive here. So if you wanna buy a meal in a normal place, no, for a everyday worker, you can pay 40 to 50 pesos for a cheap meal, no. So in that sense, you still need more than one of these notes to pay.
Yeah. Listen. Yeah. Thanks, man.
It's the cost of living.
Yeah. Get the point. Thanks.
Any other question?
Yeah, just one more quick question here, Bruce. You have any idea how many serious Mexico banknote collectors there are? And by serious, I mean people that collect older notes as well as modern notes, rarities. And I'm sure you know Rick Pontario, or know about him. Years ago, he used to have his own auction business before he teamed up with Stacks and Bowers. And they had a lot of specialty sales he did on Mexican currency, coins and banknotes. And I don't see that much of that today, frankly. So what's your perspective on the number of serious collectors?
Serious collectors?
Yeah.
It's hard because I think that I don't think there are many.
Yeah.
I think that people that focus on Mexican numismatics are more focused on coins rather than banknotes, because you know that first Mexico has a large history of coin production, we have really nice coins from different mints that were produced over several centuries. We have gold and particular silver coins that are worth a lot. So, and also we have this story about the devaluation of Mexican peso, and if you think, for example, the 10,000 pesos banknote from 1943, which I think it was several $100, and I think it was a couple of $1,000 worth when it was issued. Actually, that same note could have been paid for less than $100 by the end of the 80s. And it was the same design. Well, actually, it has a small change in design, but actually the note was still circulating. So I think that people focused on Mexican numismatics are more centered into coins. There are few collectors that actually collect series, for example, serial letters or signatures, and also there is a large quantity or large variety of series. If you collect the 1 peso banknote was issued by American Banknote Company, I think there are 1,900 different series and prefixes. So it's really a large quantity. There are not many people that actually has patience to do that. I think that the most advanced collections are still fell short for 20 or 30 different varieties. So it's quite arduous. If you try to collect these notes or the previous 500, when it was released, it was worth $50, and right now it's less than $25. So collecting from circulation notes that are worth and that after 10 years they lose half of their value, it's kind of a non-investment. So either you have a lot of money and you can collect because of the pleasure of collecting, but that implies a lot of investment at the time of these notes are being released. After some period, actually your investment is vanishing. So I think that people are not necessarily collecting seriously banknotes because of that reason, because the Mexican peso has devalued several times, and there are too many varieties that you could be collecting. Actually, I was speaking with Alex about this few weeks ago. I have a German website that tracks signatures, and I've been putting information on it for quite some time. Let me just show you the number of 500. This is the new 500 pesos that has been only 2 years in circulation. It has already, you see that it has a two-letter prefix. So every prefix has the 5 different signatures. So if you want to collect every single different note, which is the 5 signatures for each one of the prefixes, right now, after 2 years, we're already in I can see here the letter, we're already, I think, in the letter F. So it means that you will have 24 different letters from AA to AZ, then BA to BZ. So you already have hundreds of different banknotes, and each one of these prefix has 5 different signatures. So if you try to collect that seriously, that is a nonsense amount of money. So I think that it's because of an economic reason. You could try to do that after the peso gets devaluated, but it would be much harder to get a full collection. I have a colleague here that actually is a numismatic seller that is collecting the 1,000 pesos produced by American Banknote Company. He is still missing 2 serial letters. So I don't know how, I think it's more than 100 or 150 different banknotes from different serial numbers and serial series, sorry, and he's only missing 2 of them. and this note was withdrawn 40 years on. So basically, getting that by series is quite difficult after that amount of time. But paying 1,000 pesos in 1936, which was the first date in which it was issued, was a huge amount of money, because those were 1,000 pesos silver that were worth a lot. No, so I think it's kind of an economic thing. It's not the same if you compare with Australia or with Canada, which had a very stable exchange rate, and they have and if you do that as an investment, you know that at the end of the period, if at some point you want to sell the collection, it will have an increased value, not a devalued amount for the whole collection. You're on mute, Bruce.
And of course, you know, you also haven't mentioned anything about the mountain of remainders that exist out there on Mexican banks, earlier Mexican banks. I mean, it's, you know, it's just a tidal wave of these things that are available. And many are really quite expensive, which would only be of interest to really the serious dedicated collector. Yeah, I'm not talking about just, you know, money that's still monetized or is no longer monetized. So the actual face value of the note, you know, to a lot of collectors, that doesn't mean much. I mean, if you look at the Swiss franc, you know, the 1,000 Swiss franc, for example, that was issued from 54 to 1974, I believe. Well, that was demonetized a long time ago, but you know, you'll pay an awful lot of money for some specific and earlier dates of 1,000, you know, Swiss franc, although it's demonetized, so it's not worth anything face value. But I'm just talking about pure collector interest, not so much investment or what's monetized. But as I say, an example is just this absolute tidal wave of remainders that are available on Mexican banks. You spend a lifetime, you know, just getting a portion of those in your collection.
Yeah, and I think that when American Banknote Company's archives were sold, there was a lot of notes available. Now they are becoming more scarce and much more expensive. I was seeing actually for this day some specimens that were at $3,000 to $8,000 expensive, each one of them. So actually, a lot of money. But only recently people started paying attention to and recently, I mean the last 10, 15 years, the people started paying attention to the specimens. No, at the beginning, at the very first moments after the American Banknote Company's archives were sold, people were not interested on that. Actually, what we are seeing right now is some production materials also being sold, some photographic proofs, some models with the signatures pasted on them. So I wonder whether Ponterio still has, because I know that he purchased a lot of the Mexico's archive materials from American Banknotes. So I wonder whether he waited 20 years to start selling, but we are from time to time we're seeing some materials being sold out on ABNC, both from Banco de Mexico and from the specific banks. So I think that there are some collectors, but not many of them, because this is getting very, very expensive, and people actually prefer to collect issued notes than specimens. Again, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Of course, Art Mortowitz is the fellow that bought a lot of the archives, and you know, he's for years been selling you know, various specimens and remainders. And you're right, a lot of these are really being drawn down now. But he was the person, of course, that handled most of the specimens from the ABNC archives.
To my knowledge, anything that is left of the archive now is in the possession of Archives International in New Jersey, Boston.
Yeah, I don't know. Morowitz may have worked out some arrangement with them, but
that's my understanding, Bruce.
yeah, I think you're right about that. Yep.
But I don't.
Fabrizio, it's good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. I don't know what they can have, Cedrian, but recently I was searching. Hold on, Bruce. I will mute you because there is some background room.
Yeah.
Recently, I was searching for a specific note, and after a while, he didn't reply me. It's a friend, and I told her, "How long does it take to look on your desk?" And he told me, "My desk? I have to look in the warehouse." I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You have no idea. To search for the notes you want, I have to go through a warehouse. It will take me years." And that moment, I understood he must have a lot of ABNC material. And then I think he had some arrangement with Morowitz. And yeah, what he has, I don't know.
And there are some. I've been studying Banco de Mexico for at least eight years, something like that. And part of my research is trying to get the same information that I already got from American Banknote Company, because I already found some photograph proofs of the banknotes, not the paste trials, but but actually the photographs of the unissued and the issued banknotes. And part of the research is trying to convince the Banco de Mexico to also give me the same information from the banknotes designed at the Banco de Mexico from 1969 to date. So part of the research and what I presented today is part of that, trying to convince them and also try to make some interest into Mexican banknotes. Because actually, there was some interest on Mexican banknotes back in the 70s when they switched to American banknote to the banknote factory. But since the 80s, there is really a small production of books about notes. Mexican notaphilia is not necessarily a well-researched part of Mexican numismatics. So I think that another point of why there are not so many collectors is because we don't have an academic production on the banknotes.
Okay, guys, so we're close to a couple of hours now. Any more questions? All right, then I'm closing the session. Again, Cedrian, thanks a lot. I'll send you a photo of a nice ABNC book, which maybe you don't have. It's the history of ABNC, and it includes some engravings. I don't know if you heard about this book before.
Which one? The Griffith?
It's the history of ABNC.
Okay, cool. Send me the picture. I'll be glad to take a look at it.
All right.
Well,
so to everyone,
thank you very much, guys.
And Cedrian, thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge.
No, thank you for organizing these talks. I'm really eager to the next one in early January.
Sure. Thanks, guys.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks, guys. Good day. Bye.
Bye.